a good person, and I am not a monster.
Time changes nothing.
I didn't know what was going on. I called 911.
I'm sorry to this court for running away.
You made a statement to the police being interviewed that you were a monster.
Child predators are some of the most despised inmates in prison, and Juan Camargo is about to experience why. In a playground in Grand Rapids, Michigan, children used to spend their time playing and enjoying their childhood until they met Camargo. He seemed like a friendly man, offering them candy and soda, but his true intentions were far from innocent. Camargo was arrested on serious charges, and in court, he faced not only justice, but also the grieving and shocked mothers of the children involved.
I hope that someday God will lay the guilt on your heart, the pain on your heart that you have made all of us feel for your actions, for you did to us.
I will never have to think about you, say your name, anything.
With nothing to do but keep his head down, Camargo endured the angry outbursts of the mothers.
You were to me.
Thankfully, Camargo will never harm a child again, as he has been sentenced to 60 to 90 years in prison.
You can't be trusted as a member of free society anymore, and thus the sentence has to ensure that you remain behind bars and that the community's children remain safe.
Next is Beverly Burrell, whose fentanyl-laced heroin operation led to the deaths of 5 people. In Minnesota, several men, including Spencer Johnson, Max Tellier, Luke Renee, Dustin Peltier, and Nicholas Patrick, were buying drugs from Burrell. Tragically, they all died from overdoses, unaware that the drugs they had purchased were laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl-laced drugs significantly increased the danger, often resulting in death. Even the prosecutor was shocked by the brutality of Burrell's drug operations, calling her the most prolific drug dealer they had ever encountered.
You've had a front row seat to the kind of battles and misery that addiction causes.
In court, Burrell faced not only justice, but also the grief of families who were devastated by the loss of their sons.
I think he instinctively knew that if the person responsible for Max's death was held accountable, then someone else might not.
My mind replays the scene over and over again, multiple times each day, of finding our son unconscious, and then the medical team eventually bringing him down the stairs on a stretcher in a body bag.
Despite the confrontation, Burrell remained calm, admitted her guilt, and insisted that she was not a monster.
I'm a good person, and I am not a monster.
To the judge, however, Burrell was indeed a monster, as he sentenced her to 23 years in prison for murder.
Again, you have been found guilty of a single count of in the 3rd degree. I adjudge you guilty of that offense, and I commit you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 86 months. That is to say that this is a sentence of an aggregate sentence of 172 months.
The case sparked a major debate about whether Burrell could truly be considered a murderer. Many believe she is responsible, while others question if the blame lies with the addicts themselves. Burrell will have plenty of time to reflect on these questions behind bars. Fentanyl has emerged as a particularly dangerous drug, with its dealers causing a growing number of deaths. It's unusual to see a drug lord break down in court, but Benjamin Bundy couldn't bear the weight of his guilt. In New Hampshire, Bundy's drug operations resulted in the deaths of Matthew Nichols and his girlfriend, Jennifer Azara.
I would submit that this case really is, in fact, a dismal testament to where all of this ultimately leads.
Bundy was an exception among criminals, as he confessed to everything and accepted a plea deal. Although the plea deal allowed him to avoid some of the harsher aspects of the justice system, he couldn't escape the impact of his actions. In court, the families of his victims delivered heart-wrenching statements that highlighted the intense pain caused by his crimes.
The life that Matt gave to me is gone.
Time changes nothing. I miss her as much today as I did the day she died.
Bundy did his best to remain composed while the families of his victims spoke, but eventually, even a hardened drug dealer couldn't hold back his emotions. He broke down in tears, shedding his tough exterior and revealing a vulnerable side, showing that even those who seem to deserve no mercy can be deeply affected by their actions. Bundy was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison. In a surprising turn, Jennifer Azara's father offered Bundy a glimmer of hope, suggesting that he might have a chance at redemption after serving his sentence.
But 15 years, you get a second chance. I hope you use it wisely.
Joseph Stilitano turned down a plea deal and chose to face the justice system head-on. In Tampa, Florida, 29-year-old Joshua Sutphin suddenly went missing and became unreachable.
I didn't know what was going on. I called 911.
His fiancée was distraught when Joshua Sutphin went missing, but the shock she faced upon returning home was devastating. Joshua was found dead on the kitchen floor from an overdose. Despite being in treatment and having completed his program just a day before, he had overdosed. The key to solving the case came from a distinctive red dice pattern found on small drug baggies. This pattern led to the arrest of Joseph Stilotano. Shortly after Joshua's death, Stilotano was pulled over while driving Joshua's car, and police discovered the same red dice-patterned baggies in his pockets.
Those tiny baggies had a red dice pattern. The same red dice pattern that are found in the trash can of Josh and Christy's home.
It's logical to assume Stilotano was the source of the drugs, given the red dice-patterned baggies found with both Joshua and Stilotano. However, Stilotano's defense argued otherwise. Despite rejecting a plea deal, his defense claimed that Joshua had been in contact with another drug dealer before his death, suggesting that someone else might have supplied the drugs.
There is evidence of other drug transactions prior to the date of the overdose.
The jury wasn't convinced by Stilotano's defense and sentenced him to 12 years in prison for manslaughter.
Unlawfully and feloniously human being, to wit, Joshua Sutphin, which resulted from the unlawful distribution by Joseph Michael Stilitano Jr.
Convicted murderer Alex Murdoch received an additional 40-year sentence for financial crimes committed at his South Carolina law firm. He was also ordered to pay $9 million in restitution to the victims. Murdoch is already serving a life sentence without parole for the murders of his younger son, Paul, and his wife, Maggie. Despite pleading guilty to numerous financial crimes, he denies the murders and testified in his own defense. Victims' attorneys said Monday's ruling was aimed at formally holding Murdoch accountable for the crimes he committed against their clients.
Just want to say that 2 years ago, or almost, it'll be 3 years ago this year, we stood in front of Judge Newman and we asked him to make sure that at the end of all this, that Alex Murdoch gets a full cup of justice. Well, today, that happened.
The 22 federal counts are the last of Murdoch's charges, but there are no anticipated lengthy appeal hearings as he contests his murder conviction. The case of Samantha Lucille Rebecca Allen, convicted of murdering her cousin Amy, shocked Arizona deeply. Samantha and her husband, John Allen, subjected Amy to unimaginable suffering, ultimately leading to her death by suffocation. The court's decision to uphold Samantha's conviction and death sentence reflects the heinous nature of the crime. Samantha's appeal, arguing a flawed trial, was quickly dismissed. The court emphasized the compelling evidence, including graphic photos of Amy's lifeless body and a chilling videotape of Samantha and John in the interrogation room. The details of Amy's last moments are heart-wrenching. She was forced to endure hours of brutal physical exercise, despite her cries of pain, then locked in a small, airless footlocker. The court's recounting of these events highlights Allen's heartless disregard for Amy's well-being. Samantha's initial claim that Amy accidentally trapped herself in the footlocker was refuted by testimonies from other family members.
This was one of the most unnecessary deaths of a child I've ever seen.
I want to say that I'm sorry. What happened was an accident.
Witnesses revealed a troubling pattern of abuse inflicted on Amy that no child should ever have to endure. While the court upheld most of Samantha's convictions, it did overturn a 2-year sentence on one of the child abuse charges due to technicalities. In In Omaha, Nebraska, Adam Hawhey faced serious charges, including attempting to lure 2 girls in a park and possessing numerous explicit photos.
I'm here today because of a addiction that grew to more abnormal and perverse behavior.
Hawhey attributed his actions to personal losses, but those reasons do not excuse his behavior. After posting bail, he further demonstrated his predatory nature by exposing himself to a young boy in an attempt to lure him into his vehicle. Following this incident, Hawhey fled to Nicaragua.
And I'm sorry to anyone and everyone that I've offended with my actions. I'm sorry to this court for running away.
Justice prevailed when police eventually apprehended Hawhey upon his return. He was given the highest bail in Douglas County history, set at $50 million, ensuring he would remain in custody and not be freed again.
He needs to pay a heavy price for this, and we need to protect kids from this kind of behavior.
Hawhey made one final attempt at freedom by negotiating a plea deal, but he was still sentenced to 48 years in prison, down from a potential 90. In Arizona, a couple narrowly avoided jail time after their surviving children pleaded with the judge to allow them to stay at home. This followed the tragic deaths of 2 of their children and their nieces in a floodwater incident that shocked the nation. Daniel Rawlings, 38, was sentenced to 5 years of probation, while Lacey Rawlings, 34, received 4 years of probation for recklessly driving their military-style truck into the overflowing Tonto Creek in 2019, ignoring warning signs and barricades. The Rawlings family managed to escape, but Colby, Willa, and their niece Austin were tragically swept away and drowned. During the emotional sentencing, their surviving children, Nellie and Alan Rawlings, pleaded with Judge Timothy Wright to allow their parents to stay home and raise them. Considering the children's heartfelt pleas and the profound impact of the tragedy on them, Judge Wright decided against jail time. He considered the parents' remorse, clean criminal records, and the children's innocence. In addition to probation, the Rawlings were ordered to complete significant community service but were spared prison. The tragedy occurred when the family attempted to cross the creek, with the children urging them to navigate through an unfamiliar and dangerous part of the water. The defense argued that the Rawlings underestimated the risk of entering the floodwaters, leading to the devastating loss of life. Prosecutors had sought a harsher punishment, recommending a 4-year prison sentence for Daniel Rawlings due to a perceived lack of parental responsibility. Austin's mother, Lauren Johnson, expressed forgiveness towards the Rawlings, hoping they would learn from the tragic consequences of their actions.
Nights that I had laid in bed wishing I could go back and do it again, but that's not possible. I am tremendously sorry to the many people that I have caused pain. I have not seen Lauren in a very long time. And my heart goes out to her for the pain that she still suffers as a mother.
Outside the courthouse, over 100 supporters of the Rawlings family erupted into cheers and tears of relief upon hearing that their loved ones would not face incarceration. A sign reading, "Rawlings Strong," was prominently displayed, symbolizing their solidarity and resilience in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Michael Peach went to extreme lengths in Niles, Illinois to cover up his actions. He threatened the victim's family with weapons, and after an altercation, the father managed to subdue him, leading to Peach's arrest.
What I didn't know was I was being groomed and set up to practically hand deliver my son to a predator.
The judge was particularly vocal about his disgust for Peach in court, repeatedly labeling him as a monster.
Textbook pedophile, predator in every way. Mr. Peach, you made a statement to the police being interviewed that you were a monster. This court fully agrees with you that you are a monster.
After sentencing Peach to 48 years in prison, the judge promptly removed him from the courtroom. A county woman caught on surveillance video stealing packages from people's porches has been sentenced to over 2 decades in prison. Martha Lampley, whose criminal record dates back to 2008, is considered a third striker, which influenced her decision to accept a plea bargain rather than risk a life sentence from a jury or judge trial. One of her thefts occurred on Chase Avenue. Lampley, visibly distressed, faced her defense attorney as she was sentenced to a series of residential and commercial burglaries and thefts spanning 2 years.
There was no
standard MO to all the crimes. It was basically just crimes of opportunity.
Front porch thefts were the key to Lampley's conviction. Surveillance video captured her stealing a package while driving a U-Haul truck, and neighbors were able to identify her.
It was shown from the night before, and then as she came back through the neighborhood again, we were able to confirm that it was her.
Lampley, who was on probation and out on bail for previous offenses, was arrested for a total of 13 new crimes in areas including Alcohol Spring Valley and Lemon Grove. Many stolen items, such as guitars, clothes, jewelry, and shoes, were found in a rental storage facility. After pleading guilty to 4 counts, Judge Daniel Goldstein sentenced her to 23 years and 8 months in prison.
I contacted each family before and after the plea. People were happy with this. With such a menace out there taking everybody's items, they were very happy.
Luis Bogley, who lives a few houses down from a known victim, fears he may also be a target.
We had ordered some stuff from UPS, and when it was supposed to arrive, we never received it, and they said it was sent, and we tracked it, and it was missing.
He says he'll check with the sheriff's department to see if any unclaimed items might belong to him. In prison, child murder is an unforgivable sin, and those who commit such crimes often face harsh consequences, sometimes even losing their lives at the hands of fellow inmates. Shockingly, this wasn't the case for Kristen Burry, a young mother from Florida who was charged with child neglect and first-degree murder, as well as allowing the death of her son, Chance Walsh. On December 15, 2015, she watched her husband, Joseph Walsh, force a baby to wipe down their son Chance's throat without doing anything to stop him. She stood by as Chance struggled to breathe until he eventually died. Afterward, she placed his lifeless body in a crib, leaving it to decompose for over a week. When Joseph finally decided to bury him, they didn't even give him a proper burial. Instead, they carelessly buried him among garbage in a shallow grave in a wooded area of Northport, Sarasota. After this horrific act, they carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened, even traveling to South Carolina, where they were eventually caught and brought to justice. It seemed that Kristen was no stranger to losing her children. According to her mother, Kristen had 2 children before Chance, and neither remained in her care. She even traded her first child for money and a car, despite her immediate family wanting to adopt him. Her second child, Dwayne, tragically died from natural causes when he was just 2 weeks old. Kristen was sentenced to 25 years in prison for her role in the crime. Despite her horrific actions, the jury felt some sympathy for her and offered her a plea deal, which she quickly accepted. This deal required her to testify against her ex-husband, Joseph, in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, despite everything, Kristen, still deeply attached to Joseph, couldn't bring herself to betray him. Overwhelmed by her emotions, she decided to withdraw from the case in the only way she felt she could, by taking her own life. In preparation for the trial, Kristen was set to testify against her husband, and she was held in the Sarasota County Jail. Tragically, she ended her life there. A prison guard found her shortly after, but it was too late. Despite the police's efforts to save her, they were unsuccessful, and she was pronounced dead on the spot. With Kristen gone, Joseph faced a much easier time in court. His initial charges of second-degree murder and aggravated child abuse were ruled inadmissible. Although many pushed for a life sentence, he was ultimately sentenced to 45 years in prison. This is the heartbreaking case of 21-year-old Jamie Stice, who was robbed of both her life and the chance to experience the joy of becoming a mom, something she had always dreamed of. This was taken from her by a truly sadistic woman named Kathy Coy.
33-year-old Kathy Coy is accused of murdering 21-year-old Jamie Stice and pulling Stice's unborn child out of her womb. At a probable cause hearing in Warren County earlier today, a detective described exactly what he says Coy did before, during, and after that.
Kathy met Jamie through social media and pretended to be her friend, all while planning to kill her and steal her unborn child. Kathy lied to Jamie and even her own family, claiming she was pregnant. She then lured Jamie to her house by suggesting they shop for baby supplies. Once there, she ambushed and killed the young mom-to-be. The gruesome details of what happened were discussed in court for all to hear.
She's charged with Jamie Stice and kidnapping the pregnant 21-year-old's unborn child. Coy was in tears even before a detective began to outline the case against her.
It didn't take Detective Chadwin long to determine that something was very off about Kathy Coy. She had difficulty keeping her story straight and was very defensive, angry, and suspicious from the beginning.
She had a miscarriage, and
that she pretended she was pregnant and led her whole family to believe she was pregnant.
Detective Chad Wynn says while Coy pretended to be pregnant, she befriended Stice. Then, last Wednesday, he says Coy showed up at a friend's house claiming she had just given birth.
When Jamie came over to Kathy's house, Kathy used a stun gun on her to overpower her. She then brutally attacked Jamie.
Police say Coy used a stun gun on Stice and also bound her arms with zip ties. While Wynn described the scene to a judge, the victim's family members were overcome with emotion.
A friend of Kathy's called 911 carrying a newborn baby, claiming she had just given birth. However, it was immediately clear that something was very wrong.
Kathy had not just taken the victim's baby, but she had removed her uterus and some of the organs as well in the process.
But do you know?
But it was already when it was given.
But that placenta.
That's what I said out of
I know, but the placenta.
Yeah.
Carries parental DNA. Okay.
Okay.
That DNA that's in that placenta. They can get DNA from the parents of that DNA, that placenta, and it shows exactly who the parents are.
It didn't take long after Kathy arrived at the hospital and was examined for doctors to realize she had not given birth and that the baby was not hers.
She advised that Miss Coy had no pants on, and she was sitting on the placenta and the female organs and holding the baby in her hands.
Police say Coy and the baby boy were taken to the hospital, but the doctors called police to report the birth as suspicious.
All of her female organs were still in her. So, therefore, there's no way that this could be her baby.
So, whose baby was it? Detective Chadwin had to find out. It only took him a quick social media search to discover the truth.
When Kathy realized that nobody was going to buy her lie about giving birth to a baby herself, she changed up her story and said that she bought the newborn for $550.
When Kathy realized that no one believed her lie about giving birth to the baby herself, she changed her story and claimed that she had bought the newborn for $550.
I then asked Miss Coy if that baby was Jamie Stice's. I asked her directly.
What was her response?
She says, I don't know. At that time, I was very alarmed by this.
Wynn says Coy angrily denied any wrongdoing, but eventually led police to Stice's body, which was found in a wooded area.
Kathy was arrested and charged with Jamie's murder. It was later revealed that she had actually tried to involve her own child in committing this unthinkable crime.
That state police detective also testified that before the Coy told her daughter that she was going to kidnap a child and also asked her teenage son to help her commit a murder.
Her son advised that she asked him, would you help me commit a crime? And he said, what kind of crime? And she first said theft. And he said, no, but I wouldn't tell on you. She then asked him if he would help her commit.
It wasn't until Kathy's teenage son refused to help her commit the murder that she laughed it off and claimed she had only been joking. Kathy had 2 healthy children from previous relationships, but seemed obsessed with convincing everyone she was pregnant again. She even used a fake sonogram picture to convince those further close to her, maintaining these lies and her plan for months before the murder. Mental illness was the best excuse Kathy's defense team could devise. Kathy ended up taking a plea deal, which spared her from the death penalty. However, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The victim's loved ones were actually pleased with this sentence, believing that the death penalty would be too merciful considering what Kathy did to Jamie. Now, with this sentence, Kathy will spend the rest of her life behind bars, left to think about the horrific crime she committed. On October 4th, 2009, in a United States apartment, Steven Spader brutally attacked Kimberly Cates and her daughter, leaving Kimberly praying for a swift end. The true terror, however, lay in what happened to Spader next. In this case, the defendant committed a bizarre crime, almost like a scene from a Halloween movie. Little did he know, his life was soon to resemble one.
You said that Billy was actually listening and during this conversation. What was Billy's response to all this when the defendant and Chris were talking about the...
He was standing off on the side, being very quiet. He did make comments kind of defending himself for the fact that he was locked in the basement, and it was mostly just comments about how it was the first time he had ever broken into a house and he was scared.
That's what Billy was saying?
Yeah.
What about the defendant and Chris? Were they saying how they were scared?
Not at all.
The opposite?
Yeah, it was complete opposite.
From what the defendant and Chris were talking about, did they appear to think that they had killed both of the victims in the bedroom?
Yes, they did.
From the conversation, was the power off the whole time?
The whole time that Stevie was supposedly chopping at the bed and they were actually doing anything in the house, the power was supposedly off. After that, after they had thought that both victims were dead, Chris said that he went and turned the power back on.
Did the defendant say how the bedroom looked after the power was turned on?
He said that it looked like a Halloween movie.
And she died as a result of all of these wounds, causing and essentially exsanguination, which means loss of blood. So she died as a result of these multiple sharp injuries that affected her head, her neck, her torso, her left arm, and her left leg.
So to be clear, it wasn't just one wound that killed Kim Cates, it was a combination of many wounds.
Many wounds. I mean, obviously some are very superficial, and if she had only sustained those, then she would have survived. But there are several that are perforating vital organs, transecting and severing major vessels that would have contributed to this loss of organ function.
Again, for the record, how many wounds did Kim Cates have on her body?
32 in all.
Was she alive for every single one of those wounds?
Yes.
Every single one she was alive for?
They're all causing what's called a vital reaction. So bleeding in the tissues surrounding the wound, internal bleeding. They look very different from the wounds I make. When I do a postmortem examination, I use a scalpel. I don't see the same tissue reaction when I make my incisions.
She was alive the whole time?
Yes.
When a man loses his family, he feels utterly devastated, but seeking justice in court might alleviate some of his pain.
Kim was the best wife a man could have. We were soulmates and we loved each other unconditionally. Kim took great pride in providing a warm, loving home and did an amazing job of taking care of Jamie and I. She was a loving daughter, a sister, an aunt, a niece, and a great friend. It makes me sad this trial is how we will know and remember Kim Cates. For she was so much more than this tragic ending. If you had met Kim, you would want her to be your fellow worker, your PTA member, your neighbor, your workout buddy, or just your best friend. Kim was beautiful, and she will forever remain in our hearts, and her spirit will always live on in each one of us who were so blessed to have shared in her life. For Kim was about life and living. Next, I would like to talk about my beautiful daughter, Jamie. It is not known what future impact this event will have on Jamie's life. She has had to witness more evil in this world than any human being should ever be made to bear. She has already persevered many hours of surgery in her young life as a result of this crime, and still has many more to go. But I am certain that the physicians will be able to diminish the many physical scars she will carry with her forever. However, the emotional scarring Jamie has endured is immeasurable and unknown at this point. Friends and family will continue to surround her with love in the hope that the tremendous emotional burden she now carries can be lightened by all who love her. Now I'd like to talk about what an amazing girl Jamie is. After the 12-hour surgery last year, Jamie was placed in the intensive care unit, and during one of her brief periods of being awake those first couple of days, she told me what happened to her mom, and we had a good long cry together. She then told me she was disappointed about missing her kneecap testing. This was all while having her mouth wired shut. This is a testament to what an incredible, strong girl she is. While grieving the terrible loss of her mom, she was already trying to put the pieces of her life back together. Jamie was back in school part-time after 3 short weeks, made up the work missed, and has maintained straight A's ever since. She also played lacrosse this spring, field hockey this fall, and wants to learn to play ice hockey this winter. While not being as fast on her feet as she once was, Kim's spirit, tenacity, and love for life run strong in Jamie's veins. I would like to talk a little about me and the impact this forever have on my life. Kim and I had dreams, hopes, and aspirations like any family, and all those are now shattered. She was my soulmate, my best friend, my companion, and with one phone call, early on a Sunday morning, all those hopes and dreams were lost. My ability to perform my job at the high standards I hold myself was no longer possible. Prior to Kim's murder, I worked full-time, performing an important job for the men and women who protect our nation, a job I love. To do the job right required substantial travel, something that Kim and Jamie understood and supported. I now work part-time so I can care for Jamie in any way she needs me, can no longer travel for work. Others have had to step up to fill in for me in a situation that grates at me every day, because I care deeply about them and the mission we are trying to accomplish. It all seems of such little importance now given my wife's sacrifice. Now I would like to talk about family. Kim won't be there for all the special events in Jamie's life, such as getting her ready for the prom, taking pride in her graduations, helping plan her wedding, and supporting her during pregnancy and childbirth. Jamie and I will forever miss Kim, but we still have each other and we still have family. The shape and dynamics of that family are different, as others have stepped up to fill the huge void that losing Kim has left. Jamie still has mother figures in her life, and I still have very close confidants. The members of our family, while not connected by blood, have a very special emotional bond with us. A bond that I think many families would envy.
Courts treat punishment for certain criminals with decisive clarity. They are well aware of what should be done with these offenders.
Right. Now, when you first reached out to the prosecutors with these statements we've been talking about,
Yes.
The very first thing you wrote down when you were talking about this is I've got some statements,
Yes.
and you brought up that you had pending charges,
Yes.
right? The first thing you wrote about this.
Yes, I did.
Because that was in your mind.
Yes, I did.
You're thinking maybe I can trade this for some reduction in my sentence.
Yes, I did.
And you gave them one of the statements.
Yes.
And then you held the other ones back.
Yes.
You sent those to your lawyer.
Yes.
So, again, you were trying to be very careful and make sure you got kind of maximum value for these statements.
Yes.
You didn't want the prosecutors to just take them and not give you anything in exchange.
No.
You wanted to make sure you got something.
Yes.
And that's really what you were trying to set up the whole time, right? You got to make sure you get a reduction in your sentence. That's the only reason this matters.
I think an opportunity came my way and I took it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's why you were working on Spader to keep getting him.
Yes.
Encouraging him.
Yes.
Encouraging him to say things that are in these statements.
Yes.
Just like you were encouraging him with this song.
Yes.
And you had pending charges, I think you talked about, that related to something that occurred in November 2009?
Yes.
You had a pending first-degree assault?
Yes.
And you knew in your head, what could you have gotten for that first-degree assault? What kind of punishment?
7.5 to 15.
7.5 to 15 years?
Yes.
In prison. Right?
Yes.
Then you also had another pending, misdemeanor?
Yes, disorderly conduct.
And how much for that one potentially?
1 year.
Another year.
Yeah.
And then, but that wasn't all, right?
No, it wasn't.
You were on probation.
Yes, I was.
So you were facing a probation violation.
Yes, I was.
And then what could you have gotten on that probation violation?
I was on probation for a Class B felony, so anywhere for 3.5 to 7 years.
Okay, so up to 3.5 to 7 on that one. So all totaled, you're looking at what, somewhere between 12 to 23?
Yes.
If you got maxed out on everything.
Yep.
And you knew that first degree assault charge, that's the kind of thing that a judge might want to punish you for.
Yes.
Might give you kind of a hefty sentence for.
Yes.
You knew that, you know how the system works.
Yes, I do.
And you know that this affiliation with Folk Nation had come up before.
Yes.
That'd be held against you.
Yes.
And so being a gang member is not a good thing.
Not at all.
And you've been through that before, right? You've been through sentence before.
Yep.
And you know, being on probation at the time, that's a problem.
Yes, it is.
That makes judges mad.
Yep.
And they give you bigger sentences because of that.
Yes, they do.
So as you said, an opportunity came your way.
Yep.
And that opportunity was Spader.
Yes, it was.
And you're trying to cash in on that now.
Yes, I am.
The jury was deeply disturbed by the criminal's brutality, so it didn't take them long to reach a conclusion.
Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached verdicts in these cases? Yes, we have. And docket number 2010 S243, charging conspiracy to commit murder. How do you find Madam Foreperson guilty or not guilty? Guilty. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. And in docket number 2010 S245, charging conspiracy to commit burglary. How do you find Madam Foreperson? Guilty. And you say, Madam Foreperson, that the verdict is guilty on that charge. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. And finally, 2010 S244, charging the crime of tampering with witnesses and informants. How do you find Madam Foreperson? Guilty. You say, Madam Foreperson, that the verdict is guilty. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. Thank you.
No one in the courtroom, from the judge to the spectators, showed any sympathy when the sentence was announced. In this case, only hatred filled the room as they reached a decision on sentencing.
In reaching a decision on sentencing, I consider a number of factors. I consider the nature and the circumstance of the charges. I consider the evidence produced during trial. I consider the arguments made by the state and the statement made by Mr. Cates. I also consider whether there are any mitigating factors, and there are none. I consider whether there are any aggravating circumstances. Those aggravating circumstances are exponential in number, including but not limited to your threatening behavior towards witnesses right here in this courtroom during the trial, requiring this court on 3 separate occasions to admonish you through counsel. I also consider the goals of sentencing, which are punishment, specific deterrence, general deterrence, segregation from the community, and rehabilitation. And I find that all of those goals are met by the sentence proposed by the state. Based on all of the above, I could go on for days and days and days about the depth of your depravity, but it is sufficient to say that you belong in a cage. For that reason, I am sentencing you consecutively to the maximum penalties which apply to your remaining convictions to ensure that you stay in that cage for the rest of your pointless life. As such, you are sentenced as follows. I have sentenced you already on 10S241. On 10S242, the charge of attempted murder on Jamie Cates. Finding of guilty is entered. You are sentenced to the New Hampshire State Prison for not more than life, nor less than 50 years. There is added to the minimum sentence a disciplinary period equal to 150 days for each year of the minimum term of your sentence to be prorated for any part of the year. The sentence is to be served as follows. Stand committed, commencing today. This sentence is consecutive to 10S241. The following conditions of this sentence are applicable. You are to participate meaningfully and complete any counseling, treatment, and educational programs as directed by the correctional authority. You are ordered to be of good behavior and comply with all the terms of this sentence. Do you understand the terms of this sentence?
Yes.
In 10S243, the conspiracy to commit murder charge, a finding of guilty is entered. You are sentenced to the New Hampshire State Prison for not more than 30 years nor less than 15 years. There is added to the minimum sentence a disciplinary period equal to 150 days for each year of the minimum term of your sentence to be prorated for any part of the year. The sentence is to be served as follows. Stand committed, commencing today. This sentence is consecutive to dockets number 241 and 242. The following conditions of this sentence are applicable. You are to participate meaningfully and complete any counseling, treatment, and educational programs as directed by the correctional authority. You are ordered to be of good behavior and comply with all the terms of this sentence. Do you understand the terms of this sentence?
Yes.
In 10S245, Finding of guilty is entered. This is the conspiracy to commit burglary. You are sentenced to the New Hampshire State Prison for not more than 15 years, nor less than 7.5 years. There is added to the minimum sentence a disciplinary period equal to 150 days for each year of the minimum term of your sentence to be prorated for any part of the year. The sentence is to be served as follows. Stand committed commencing today. This sentence is consecutive to 241, 242, and 243. Other conditions of this sentence are that you are to participate meaningfully and complete any counseling, treatment, and educational programs as directed by the correctional authority. You are ordered to be of good behavior and comply with all the terms of this sentence. Do you understand the terms of this sentence?
Yes.
Finally, in 10S244, the tampering with witnesses. A finding of guilty is entered. You are sentenced to the New Hampshire State Prison for not more than 7 years, nor less than 3.5 years. There is added to the minimum sentence a disciplinary period equal to 150 days for each year of the minimum term of your sentence to be prorated for any part of the year. The sentence is to be served as follows. Stand committed commencing today. This sentence is consecutive to docket number 241, 242, 243, and 245. The following conditions of this sentence are applicable. You are to participate meaningfully and complete any counseling, treatment, and educational programs as directed by the correctional authority. You are ordered to be of good behavior and comply with all the terms of this sentence. Do you understand the terms of this sentence?
Yes.
The clerk will advise you of your right to sentence review on these remaining charges.
Stephen Spader, you are hereby notified that you have the right to apply for a review of the state prison sentences imposed on you today.
In August 2019, in Morris County, Michael Barrasone fatally shot his tenant, Lauren Kanarek. The prosecution questioned many witnesses to expose the suspect's activities and provided a wide range of evidence.
Can you please tell the jury where you work?
I work at Morristown Medical Center.
And approximately how long have you worked there?
A little over 20 years.
What's your capacity there? What's your job?
I'm an attending surgeon in chest surgery, thoracic surgery.
Can you tell the jury what thoracic surgery is?
It's surgery of the chest.
Can you tell the jury briefly about your educational background?
I went to college at Duke University. I went to medical school at Yale. Did several years of research and general surgery residency at Yale, and then went to the University of Iowa, where I was trained as a chest surgery specialist. Then went into practice for 2 years in the Brunswick area, then came back to Morristown after that.
Do you have any medical licenses?
I do. New Jersey, I think, is my only active one at this point.
And are you board certified?
I am, in chest surgery, thoracic surgery.
I want to direct your attention to August 7th, 2019. Were you working at Morristown Hospital that afternoon?
I was.
Can you explain what your role was that afternoon?
I believe I was finishing my operative schedule, and I received a phone call from the head of the trauma group that they had problems with a patient who was in the emergency room and they needed my emergency help.
Did you at that point go to the emergency room to assist with that patient?
I did. I went there within a minute of the phone call. I was just down the hall and knew in advance that they were having trouble with somebody who was bleeding after reportedly a wound, and the patient was unstable. So I went right there.
Did you know who the patient was at that time?
I did not know their name or when I got the phone call. And
did you come to later learn at some point, whether after the surgery or before, that was an individual named Lauren Kanarek?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe for the jury what your initial observations of Ms. Kanarek were when you encountered her?
The patient had very low blood pressure, was hypotensive, had bled probably about half of her blood volume prior to my arrival. The trauma service had been resuscitating her. They relayed to me that her heart had already stopped once and that had come back. She had significant amounts of ongoing bleeding already documented there in the emergency room. And within, I don't know how many minutes, but not very long, we were transporting her emergently to the operating room to stabilize and then stop it.
Did you see any evidence of resuscitative measures?
The trauma service had already been doing something, so they had intravenous catheters in her. She had been on a ventilator, so she was being supported for her breathing. I think she had 2 chest tubes in, one on the right side and one on the left to evacuate any blood. And they had attempted but not proceeded with fully opening her chest, trying to make sure that they could try to clamp her aorta, which is a way to raise somebody's blood pressure when they're bleeding out. And they had not yet succeeded in that. So she had an incision on her chest, but they had not gone into the chest cavity, as far as I could tell.
Based on your training, education, and experience, did you determine whether surgery was necessary?
Yeah, she needed to go immediately to an operating room when I was there, and we were there maybe a minute or two. I don't think it was even that long. It was just enough to get the equipment with her transported, and we went in straight away.
Was she taken to the operating room? When she was taken to the operating room, were you with her?
I believe I was at her bedside as we went down the hall.
Who else was present at the time of the surgery?
There was an attending anesthesiologist. There were at least 1 or 2 other members of the anesthesia team helping them. There was at least 1, if not 2 members of the trauma service. I think 1 or ultimately both of my partners came in, as well as surgical residents and multitude of nurses and support team.
Did you participate in that surgery?
I did.
And can you tell the jury briefly what you recall about the procedures that were conducted?
First thing we did was position her on her side so we could get into the chest cavity and get control of any active points, and also what we call clamping her aorta, which is putting literally a metal clamp across the big blood vessel that comes out of the heart, in order to stop any flow to other parts of her body so we could raise the blood pressure to her head and to her heart to keep her alive. And that was our first maneuver while we were giving her blood products and trying to stabilize her before we did much of anything else other than putting pressure on the points in and around her chest cavity and her lung. So we made a big incision, we opened her chest, spread it wide, we put the clamp on her aorta, and then started blood products until she got a better resuscitation.
After you had done that, did you see any evidence of damage inside her chest?
She had 2 sites of injury to the lung itself, one from the upper part of the lung, that's the upper lobe, and another appeared to be a penetrating injury to the lower lobe, both of which were raw and blowing air, because that's what happens when you have a slice injury or a penetrating trauma to the lung.
What procedure did you perform to address that issue?
We stapled using a mechanical device that sort of seals some of the injuries, and then we oversewed some of the other ones. We ensured that there was no active from any other sites, and ultimately, once we had her blood pressure stabilized, removed that clamp. Watched her for probably a good 30 to 45 minutes just to make sure there wasn't some delay from some other site of injury.
In 2019, in Cleveland, Rayceon Howard took the life of Lyric Lawson. To reach a verdict, the jury must be familiar with and hear arguments from both parties. This case was no different.
Your Honor, both of these cases have been fully pre-tried and all discovery has been exchanged. Part of those pre-trial discussions, it's my understanding, we have come to a plea agreement. That plea agreement would have the defendant withdrawing his fully entered pleas of not guilty and entering guilty pleas to the following counts. First, Your Honor, in case number 644-613, the defendant would plead guilty to count 2 as indicted, a felony of the 4th degree possession. As part of the plea agreement, in case number 644-613, Your Honor, the remaining counts against the defendant would be dismissed. Next, Your Honor, we would move to case number 646-565. Again, Your Honor, this case has been fully retried. All discovery has been exchanged. As part of those discussions, Your Honor, we have come to a plea agreement in this case as well. The defendant would be pleading guilty to the following counts. First, Your Honor, at this time, the state would ask to amend count 1 from aggravated murder to murder in violation of 2903.02a. In addition to pleading guilty to the amended count of murder, Your Honor, the defendant would plead guilty to the 3-year specification on count number 1. The state would then dismiss the 1-year specification and the 5-year specification. In addition to amended count 1, Your Honor, the defendant would then be pleading guilty to an amended count 5. The state at this time, Your Honor, would ask to amend count 5 attempted murder by deleting the 1-year firearm, the 3-year firearm, and the firearm 5-year specification. In addition to that, Your Honor, the state would be adding a couple victims onto count 5. We would be adding Symphony Lawson, Jaylani Neal, Leilani Neal, and Harmony Lawson. Those are some of the victims that are named in additional counts, Your Honor. With that amendment, Your Honor, the defendant then would be pleading guilty to attempted murder, a felony of the first degree. In addition to count 5, Your Honor, the defendant would plead guilty to count 7, and we would amend that as well. The defendant would plead guilty after the amendment by deleting the 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year firearm specifications, meaning the defendant would plead guilty to a second count of attempted murder, a felony of the first degree.
Losing a child is devastating, but when someone takes that child's life, the pain is even greater. In court, the victim's mother gave an emotional statement.
Looking at the child's face, you know, you couldn't protect them. It's one of the worst feelings I've ever felt in my life. I was in the hospital with my daughter and I instantly. My daughter screamed when the paramedic picked her up. Now it's the last thing she said. I held my daughter's hand in the hospital. I had to make the decision to pull the plug. While the child who I burned. To hear children having a conversation or something they should know absolutely nothing about. They should know nothing about. I should never have to be sitting here speaking about my child being shot in the head while she is laying down asleep. No one in my house had absolutely anything to do with nothing. My child did absolutely nothing. My 4-year-old had my daughter's blood splattered across her face. My niece was a bullet grazing on her ear. This wasn't just a close call. Like, there was a space here going, it blew up. It blew up. There was a fire. It wasn't just my house being up. It was multiple things when I walked in my house. It looked like someone took a pencil sharpener and just threw it everywhere. Everywhere. Not only did you take my child, you took my life. There is no comfort of my own home. But my child hurt. There's no more just step down or just sometimes you can ignore it. They're terrified. My kid slept in the closet. You don't understand. To hear your child screaming in the middle of the night because they can't go to sleep. And there's nothing you can do about it. I can't stop the nightmares. I can give them as much counseling in the world, but nothing is going to stop the visions you see every day. I used to hear people rethink about stuff that happened to them and the fact that they can think about it so vividly. I can remember everything. The smell of in the hospital room. The smell of in my house. You have ripped my family apart. You do not understand the extent of what you have done. My child will never grow to graduate. I won't see my daughter go to prom. My daughter wants to become famous so she can buy a house for her family. She will never be able to accomplish this goal. Never. My kids slept together every day. Every day my kids slept together. They have never been apart. You do not understand what this is doing to me.
Case number 644613, count 2, felony to 4th degree, 16 months. And on case number 646565, count 1, 3 years mandatory term for specification served prior to and consecutively to the underlying term of 15 years to life, just on count 1. On count 5, felony of the 1st degree, 5 years. On count 7, felony of the 1st degree, 5 years. Counts 3 and 5 will be served concurrently and consecutive to count 1. As to counts 3 and 5, the court would note once again that it finds the indefinite sentencing provisions of SB 201 to be unconstitutional. Therefore, I impose the flat 5 years. There is a mandatory 5 years post-release control on counts 3 and 5. I'm sorry, 5 and 7. It's not 3 and 5, it's 5 and 7. And the sentence is concurrent with case 644613. Now, you'll be serving an aggregate sentence of 18 plus 5 years, which is 23 years to life. You'll be eligible for parole consideration after serving 23 years. The court now will designate you as a violent offender. You'll be advised of your registration requirements. You've got a copy of that as you read. You've been convicted or pled guilty to a qualifying violent offender offense as defined in 290341, and you will be required to enroll in person with the sheriff of the county in which you establish residency within 10 days of coming into that county, or occupying a dwelling for more than 3 days in the county. You are required to provide the sheriff certain information, including your social security number, full name, and any alias you use, your residence address, information regarding the offense of which you were convicted or pled guilty, a description of any scars, tattoos, or other distinguishing marks on your person, the name and address of any place where you are employed or attend school, any driver's license number, commercial driver's license number, or state identification card number issued to you, and the license plate of any other vehicle owned or operated by you or registered in your name. The vehicle identification number and description of the vehicle must be provided to the sheriff. That's it after your, if you are released, if and when you are released. You are required to provide the sheriff fingerprints and palm prints. The sheriff will also obtain a photograph of you at the time of the enrollment. After the date of initial enrollment, you are required to re-enroll annually. You must update or amend any of the office within 10 days of the anniversary of the calendar date on which you initially enrolled. If you change your residence address, you shall provide written notice of that change to the sheriff with whom you most recently enrolled, and to the sheriff in the county in which you intend to reside. And you are required to comply with all these requirements for a period of 10 years, unless the sentencing court determines otherwise. You are expected to reside with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction for at least 18 years, for at least 23 years before you're considered for parole. I would remind you on counts 5 and 7, you're subject to 5 years post-release control on those counts, although the parole-like provisions will override these. Post-release control is a parole period after incarceration. If you violate the terms of post-release control, you may look at additional time of up to half of the original sentence and/or a charge of felony escape if you're violated by the parole authority or Department of Corrections. If you're on judicial release on counts 5 and 7, you would, and you violate the terms of judicial release, you would return to prison to serve the remainder of your term. As an addition here on the violent offender, if you fail to enroll or verify your residence at the specified times, that may result in criminal prosecution. You can be asked to sign that form and give you copies. All right. The cost. The fine is waived. Defendant's order remanded. and the sheriff patrol transport. Is there, oh, one more thing on the, on case number 631278, in case you were originally with, the court finds a violation of your community control and your community control is terminated. Very good. With respect to the consecutive prison term, the court will just add the addition of these findings to the record that if two or more of the offenses committed as a single course of conduct and harm so great or unusual that a single term does not really reflect the seriousness of the conduct is the reason I've added the 5 years on the 2 felonies in the first degree. All right. Yeah, we covered everything for the record.
Judge, there was the extradition cost of $642.
Yeah, to cost, I believe that's does the court pay those costs?
I think so, Your Honor. It's on the docket. I know
It's on the docket. You will be, there'll be assessed.
Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.